All right, that's good. All right, quick update on what's going on with the 20 valve Avant. About 2 months ago, we were driving along and the engine shut off and started making a tapping noise. And I thought the timing belt had broke. We got it towed home and timing belt is still on there, but I pulled all the spark plugs out and borescoped each cylinder, and they've got exhaust valve marks on top of 4 out of 5 pistons. So I'm thinking it jumped time somehow. I don't know until I get in here what I'm going to find, but we're in the process of stripping it down. And I actually sourced a partial set of intake valves and a full set of exhaust valves from Audi Performance here in Arvada, Colorado. So yeah, we're gonna have to tear the intake manifold off, get the exhaust manifold. I've got to get the intercooler out so I can get to all the timing components. And hopefully once I'm in there, I'll be able to figure out what exactly happened and why the timing changed. All right, as you saw, we were pushing the 200 Avant into the garage there a minute ago. About 2 months ago, we were out driving around and the engine shut off and made the dreaded sewing machine noise. And sure enough, something happened with the timing where the valves on the exhaust side all hit the pistons. And I'm starting to tear it apart here. Timing belt is still on it, and I'm not quite sure how this happened. I've read that the keyways on the cam and the crank can sometimes break on the sprocket, but everything feels tight. So I'm gonna dig in here a little bit more and see if we can't figure out what's going on. All right, so I have the timing cover off. In order to do that, there's 2 8mm hex bolts there that, due to the way these engines sit in these cars, there's no clearance and the bolts would go up right against the intercooler, which is right in there. But intercooler sits there. I had to take the front bumper off, the lower intercooler hose, and then I had to take all the belts off. And as you can see, there is some timing belt material, I'm thinking is what that is, which is really weird because you can still see it's a Continental Conti-Tech belt. So the backing is still on there, but as you can see, there's a little bit of slack there, and the tensioner doesn't appear to be seized or anything, and it's still has a little bit of tension on that side, so I'm not sure what exactly is going on here other than maybe the belt stretched. According to the paperwork I had, this belt was done about 8,000 to 9,000 miles ago, which is way under the service interval, but on the other side, it was also done 8+ years ago. I think it was 2013 when the belt was done. So maybe it was just due for a belt, and probably my bad judgment. I should have just gone ahead and replaced it, but I was thinking 8,000 miles, it should have been good to go. So anyway, we're gonna pull this apart and try to figure out exactly why this thing jumped time. All right, fast forward here, we got the head off. We've got the engine set on top dead center there, and as you can see, we've got kiss marks on all 5 pistons. They're really light, so I'm not going to worry about replacing the pistons themselves. But I think I had originally said that the exhaust valves were bent. And as you can see, all 5 intake valves, or I guess all 10 intake valves, have marks on them. A couple of them actually are closed, but as you can see, there's a few in here that are not closed. So we're going to go ahead and replace all the intakes. I actually had to order 4 more because I only had 6. And then looks like number 5 exhaust is open. I'm sure that's probably just because of the lobes holding it open or something. I've marked the timing, marked the distributor, and I'm ready to pull the cams out, and we'll go ahead and do all of them here. It was pretty straightforward taking everything out. It was a lot of work, but I'd say the hardest part was the exhaust manifold. I actually had to undo the 2 down pipes where they meet the catalytic converters, and those bolts were not easy to get to. I had to undo the coolant and oil lines off the turbo and got it hanging down just far enough. I probably should have pulled the whole thing, but it was a lot of work either way here. The intake manifold was pretty straightforward. It's got these, I think it's a 6mm hex bolt. And if you're doing this job, I would recommend using a good high quality hex bit set. I actually used my set of Snap-on 3/8 drive. These are like hardened steel. I would recommend, I used my pocket screwdriver and cleaned the inside head out, and then when you do those, make sure you tap the socket into the hex head with a hammer or something, because they're not in there super tight, but they will strip out on you. Ask me how I know that. Here's the front of the motor. Actually, I'd say that probably the most difficult part was getting the harmonic dampener out of there. I'll post some pictures right after this, but whatever this was on here with, it's kind of like almost like a Teflon pipe dope, and it was hard as concrete, and just getting it out of there was a big hassle. I ended up having to put a 24-inch Snap-on 1/2-inch ratchet on there with like a foot-long cheater bar, and had to use my leg to break it loose. And there's an actual holding fixture. I'll post a picture of that here in a minute too. But what I did was that notch you see on the dampener right there, what I did was wedge this nail puller bar right there in between the socket, and then held this right there on this, I guess that's like the front motor mount, and it was able to hold that loose, and that way I didn't have to use an impact on there, because I was originally afraid that the keyway on this engine might have been damaged, which may have caused it to jump time, but I am not seeing that at this point. Timing belt was actually in very good shape. Like I said earlier, it only had about 8,000 miles on it from what the paperwork said. It's not missing any teeth. It's still really flexible. You turn it inside out here, it's not showing any signs of damage or anything. So I have a theory as to what caused the engine to jump time. So what I think happened here is this power steering belt is not in good shape. I think it jumped and snapped a couple of the teeth off of there, and when doing so, this piece that I have tied on here was wadded up inside the timing case, and this is like a piece of the back of the belt, which you can see is peeling off there. And what I think happened on this engine was that piece got sucked in the bottom under this dust shield and wrapped itself around the timing cog, and then pulled itself up into the cam sprocket, or maybe on the crank sprocket itself, and caused the thing to jump a tooth or two of timing, perhaps a couple different incidents. But at that point, I think that's when the actual valves hit the pistons, was when the piece of that belt rolled through the timing cogs there. All right, we are disassembling the 5-cylinder 20 valve head here. This is a valve spring compressor that I got off Amazon. It was like $29. I'm pretty happy with it so far. The geometry is kind of weird on it, but it does the job. It's pretty thick steel. It's got 2 different diameters. I'm using the larger one here. This fits inside the housing for the actual lifter itself, since it's overhead cam. Then you just basically want to put this part square on the valve head so it's not pushing on the aluminum, and then fit it down in there. Kind of gotta adjust the depth on this so it doesn't push it in too hard or too soft. But then just squeeze it down there. I've got a skinny magnet retrieval tool here, and you just fish out. It's like a standard 2-piece split valve stem keeper, just like a Chevy would have or anything. And I've got these in order 1 through 5. When you pull this out here, you want to do this pretty slowly, just so it doesn't shoot apart. And then same deal, get your keeper or the upper retainer out, and then I don't know if it matters, I'm keeping these oriented in the same up position. I think they're probably the same either way, but I don't want to mess anything up, so I'm going to put that with the correct lifter there. And then we'll pull these valves out. I'll hold these up and compare them to a regular one, but you can tell I saved a really bent one here. I don't know if you can see that on there, but it's these toward the back here are not nearly as bent as the others. But anyway, that's that. I'm almost done with this, and then I am going to put the new valves in, and we're going to lap them just to make sure they have a good contact pattern, and then we will reassemble the head. All right, I've got I've got actually a half set of used valves, and then I had to get the rest new. I actually wasn't sure I would be able to get a full set of new valves, so I found some really good ones, cleaned them up with a wire wheel, and we're going to lap these in here. So you just have a suction cup, make sure that's clean. And then I've got some Permatex water mix valve grinding compound. It's got like carbide in it with like a silicone base, I think. And I just put like 3 or 4 small blobs, like 90 degrees apart, on the valve seat itself. And I wiped all these down earlier. And you just slowly drop it in there. And then lick your suction cup there. And it's just like kind of like fire starter. Just go like this. This is actually the first time I've ever actually hand lapped valves out in the real world. Outside of like automotive school we did this, but you just do this, you can kind of just feel it, and you pick it up to kind of redistribute the compound there, and you'll feel it kind of grinds, and as you're going you can just feel it get smooth, and you do that a couple times. And I'm surprised the suction cup hasn't fallen off yet, but I don't know if you can actually hear this, but it's getting quieter as it gets smoother there. And pick it up, redistribute it, let it go just a little more. Pick it up one last time, and this one's feeling pretty smooth. You just want to look at the actual, there it fell off there, the actual seat itself, and make sure it's uniform in width. You can kind of tell the contact pattern of the valve seats as they fit together. So you can do this with a drill, but I've heard stories if you do it too much, you can burn through and burn too much material off. And the point of seating the valves, aside from having a good seal, is you want it to have full contact pattern around. I'm sure you probably can't see this on camera, but this one looks pretty good already. But if it doesn't have full contact all the way around, it'll make a hot spot, especially under like a load, and if it gets that hot spot, you'll actually burn the valve itself, and then it won't seat because it does weird stuff like heats up on one side, or as the valve goes in contact with the seat is actually how it like cools itself down and disperses heat. So we're going to go ahead and do that to the rest of these and put it all back together. All right, I'm finally reassembling the head here. It took like a week or two to get the last of the new intake valves. I was able to find them on eBay for about 12 bucks a piece. I wouldn't say this is difficult putting these in, but this overhead cam style, the spring sits down inside there, and I was trying it with my valve spring compressor, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for you to put the keepers in. So I actually kind of found a trick here. I'll see if I can't tape it. So what I'm doing is dropping the top keeper in, or both the 1 and 2 keepers there with the valve retainer and all that, and kind of just stuffing it in there. And then what I'm doing is taking a piece of this hard reinforced plastic, and I lay it on top of here, and then I'm actually using a 1/2-inch drive ratchet with a 5/8 spark plug socket, and putting it over there and pushing it down in there and just kind of working it, and the plastic kind of pushes the keeper down itself. So I'm going to see if I can't videotape putting, I'm down to the last 2 here, so let me see if I can get a shot of this for you. All right, hopefully you can see this here. So I've got that there. This stuff's pretty thick. It's kind of been poking holes in every time I do this. So put that down over there, just lay this flat, and then kind of push down and rock it a couple times and pull it up and see if, it got one side in. So I'm gonna pull that out and attempt to kind of jostle it a little bit. Still didn't get it, it's almost there. And still not. I'm gonna try it with this piece of plastic again. And I just felt a click there, and the keeper is in there. So this is a lot easier than doing it with this tool. I tried putting it in with like magnets and putting like got some sticky like trans gel stuff they call it, and it took me probably an hour and a half to put 4 of these in, and I just did the last 4 in like 10 minutes. So hopefully that helps. All right, so as we were going back together with the camshafts, I got everything torqued down here, and I'm not sure if you can see, but on the back of this cam, I should have taken a picture before, that's the timing mark, and that is supposed to be, you can see it right through there. The yellow mark right where my finger is supposed to be lined up with the top of the, basically the surface where the cam cover sits on the head there. And I'll show you another option here. So here's the other mark. If you were to just be doing a timing belt on this car, this notch right here lines up with that dot. And then I'm going to pull this back off again. It's kind of hard to see, but there's the mark in there. And when I had that set on there, there's 2 dots on the back side of the cam here. And if you can see, they're not lined up. And from what I'm reading, those notches are supposed to line up, or those circles there, which means the cam is actually a tooth or 2 off. And I thought at first maybe this camshaft chain had jumped a tooth or something, so I hadn't initially pulled this piece off, but in doing so, you can tell the keyway there is messed up, and then the key actually fell out and it's broken. So I think I found my actual culprit here, in addition to that belt piece being in the timing belt. So I'm gonna have to order a new 103, or let's see, 034 109 111 cam sprocket. More to come. All right, it's been a couple weeks since I worked on this car. I've got the head back on. So I think in the one of the earlier videos I shot, I was showing how to line up the timing marks. And I don't know if you can see this in there, but there's 2 dots on the back side of here, and I could not get them to line up, even with the cam gear timing mark at the top of this. So what I found, I pulled the cam gear off, and the keyway had sheared off. I think I've got it right. So there's the keyway. It like broke the tab right off of that, and what actually happened on this engine when that piece of belt got stuck in the timing pulley, it actually moved that off a couple degrees, and that's what bent the valves. I had a hard time finding one of these. I ordered it off Rock Auto. It ended up being for a 10 valve. Could not find a 20 valve pulley anywhere. So I bought this. It's a Volkswagen GTI 16 valve pulley. There's the part number. It's got the keyway is actually part of the gear itself. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a height difference there. So I'm kind of thinking when I get this in there that I'm going to have to probably not put the dust cover back on the timing component system there. So anyway, just going back together with it. The hardest part so far has been all the putting the nuts and the spacers back on. Way under here, I don't think you can see it, but underneath the turbo there was the hardest one to get to. I had to use a crow's foot and just do it like a 1/8 of a turn at a time. But yeah, anyway, going back together, I will take another video when I get that pulley on there so you can see that. All right, I've got a pro tip here for you that I learned the hard way. The lifters themselves, you probably saw in my previous getting the valves out of the motor, I'd left the lifters on the ground, shiny side up, and when I went to put everything back together and tighten the cam bolt or cam bearing caps down, I flipped the motor over and all the intake valves had stuck open. And the exhaust valves for some reason did not stick open, but come to find out, if you leave those for an extended period of time, like when I was waiting for Rock Auto to deliver the valves, they will expand and lose all their oil inside. So, and that's exactly what had happened. I'm not sure why the intakes were the only ones that did that. But talking to a couple other people, when you have those out for an extended period of time, put them in a oil bath, shiny side down, with clean engine oil, and that way if they do decompress, they don't suck air in there. And anyway, when I bolted them down, I left them overnight and came back out and they had all recompressed just from the valve spring tension, but just hopefully that helps somebody out. All right, the next parts issue that I ran into here with this car from ordering stuff from Rock Auto was this timing belt. I got a made in USA Gates T170 timing belt. Put everything all back together, got the crankshaft bolt tightened down to 258 foot-pounds like the book calls for, and the belt would get up to like there and wouldn't even go on. So I pulled it all back apart. I counted the teeth on this thing and it has 142 teeth, and come to find out the correct belt has 147 teeth. So that much made that big a difference. Let me see if I can show you here. All right, so the Daco is on the left side of your screen. So as you can see, I've got these held down, and you've got about 3/4 inch difference, and that was enough to where I could not get it on there, and my belt stretcher didn't work. But anyway, we're going to try to put this back together, and I'll show you the timing marks. All right, I was pretty careful to get the coolant drained on this vehicle while I had the head off, and I thought just for fun I would pull the drain plug and maybe see if there was coolant dripping out, and sure enough there's coolant coming out of the crankcase. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this. I was not going to change the oil on this just because I changed it like 500 miles ago, but as you can see, there's a lot of coolant in here, so I'm really glad that I caught this. And just a word of caution, if you have that head off, okay, and there finally it's getting clean oil, or not clean, but not mixed with coolant, so just remember that if you ever have the head off or anything like that. All right, I've got the timing belt on and it is properly tensioned. Another pro tip, make sure it is, when you put this on, it's on this side of the pulley. Don't ask me how I know that. So there's a lot of marks on this engine itself, and the weird thing is this is the first motor I've done that doesn't have marks for the belt. You just put it on and it can only go on so much, but you can see there's a mark on the balancer there that sort of lines up with this. And then I was reading online that there is a mark right there on the timing cover that also corresponds with that, but they say not to go off of that. I'm not sure why. When I put it back together, I guess I'll see if that's close to lining up. But so we've got that. I've got my long screwdriver in there. You can watch got a pulley on, or this on the pulley, so I was bumping it back and forth, and you can see this, and you want this to be all the way on top dead center. Like I mentioned before, we've got that mark there, which we will verify lines up with the cam cover. We've got, let's see if I can get around. Anyway, it's right in there. I mentioned it before. That mark needs to be flush with the top of the head there. You've got the two dots, which you can't really see, but they're lined up. I did mark the chain, so that's good. And then the last one I wanted to show you, and you might have to take my word for it here, but there is a, let me see if I can zoom in. All right, so right in there, okay, you can see it there. That's the actual flywheel, and that line in there corresponds with that little indent on the bell housing. So you want to make sure that's lined up. And then lastly, on the, try not to break anything here, but you can see the mark on the distributor there. That's like the Hall effect sensor. It lines up with the notch on the actual shaft where the rotor goes in. So if you've got all those lined up, you should be good. On the water pump here, this is actually how you tension it. So I was prying off of that. I'll zoom out here a bit. And then, so this bolt, and this bolt are for the water pump. And the water pump is what puts tension on here. So I was prying down on this to put upward tension on the pump, tighten these down, and then the only spec they call for is you should just barely be able to turn this 90 degrees, which I can just barely do that. So yeah, as long as you got all that set up, you should be good. Another last word of warning, when you put this pulley in, make sure you tap this in. There's a really skinny 10mm bolt. Do not use this to pull the pulley in because it will break. It's only, I think the spec is 7 foot-pounds, and if you use that to pull it in, it will not survive. All right, we got everything put back together as far as the vehicle starting. So we're gonna do the final start do. All right, moment of truth, we're gonna fire her up. All right, moment of truth, we're gonna fire injectors have probably bled down, so prime it again. All right, as you can see in that last scene, the car is not starting. A quick check revealed that we have no injector pulse or spark going to the spark plugs. So I'm going to do a part 2 here, and we're going to dive into the diagnostic on that, and hopefully it's nothing related to the original concern of the timing belt and all that.